Hello everyone and welcome to this video tutorial of Trigger Manager, a system that helps you centralize and manage all of your triggers inside the scene. These triggers can be either physics triggers or measured by distance or simple Boolean values. So let's get started. As you can see in this scene right here, I've got this yellow cube. This is going to be my player, or simply the object that I'm going to move across the map. Now when I get close to this red obstacle, I want it to elevate. As for these two poles or cubes, consider this to be some sort of finish line. It's going to give some sort of effect. So if we play the game, as you can see, I can move the player. But if I come close to the red obstacle, absolutely nothing happens. Everything is just dead. Now, let's fix this by using Trigger Manager, of course. So I'm going to start off by creating an empty game object, add component, Trigger Manager. Now, as you can see, you've got two tabs, the Settings tab and the Triggers tab. In this video, we'll be tackling first the Physics tab. And when you click on the Triggers tab, you've got other sub-tabs, which is Physics, Distance, and Booleans. As I mentioned, we're going to tackle Physics in this video, and we'll have other videos for Distance and Boolean. So, let's get started. We're going to add a new element. As you can see, this cube is shown, right, called physics trigger. Now, you can enable or disable this gizmo by using this property, as you can see, and you can change the name. In the name property. Now, we want to set this physics trigger that's going to detect the player on the red obstacle. How do I do this? First of all, as you can see, it's this is the empty game object handle. As you've noticed, you can simply just drag it through the scene view right here, but this can be pretty tedious. So the second best option is to simply drag and drop your destination, your transform, and simply stitch it onto the snap to transform property. As you can see, it's been snapped to the center of the obstacle. And if you've noticed, the snap to transform is back to null. This is because it sets the trigger position and then resets itself to null, exposing itself to further changes and other different transforms. But what's important is the trigger position has been set. Right, now we've set the position. What's next is the trigger shape. Do we want it to be a box, or a sphere? If you set it to a sphere, the Y and Z axis are set to -1, and you can't change them. Only the X axis gets put into consideration. Okay? So remember this, if it's a sphere, only the X-axis works in terms of the trigger size. But for the box, yeah, everything works. Okay, so for this example, I want to use a box shape. So let's do this. 6 maybe. 9. 9 would be good. Okay, yeah, kind of good enough. Maybe we can set this to 5. Okay, so we've set the first thing, which is the trigger, its position and its size. Now, the layers and tags to catch. What is the layers and tags that you, of the player, obviously, that you want to catch? I've got my player on the default layer and has a tag of player. Right, so this is exactly what I'm going to do. Layer default, tag names, add player. You can obviously add other tag names, as you can see. Right, now, what functions do you want to trigger? Or how are you going to trigger them in the first place? On the red obstacle, I have the script right here. That's responsible for the elevation and closing of the red obstacle. Right? the whole shebang. What's important is this public void elevate. This is what I want to call when the player enters the trigger, and close is what I want to call when the player exits the trigger. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to drag, I'm going first to add on the on trigger enter, drag the red obstacle, choose my script, and then elevate. Same thing here. Drag and drop a red obstacle, move object, and close when it exits. Right? Let's check. Now I'm moving my player. You see? When it enters the trigger, this event runs, which is elevate. When it exits the trigger, close runs. Yep. Okay. This exit event run. When do you want the exit method to actually run? Because remember, you can have several players or things that are identified by the layers in text to catch on the same trigger. So do you want the exit method to run on every single exit, or on the last exit? So let me give a better example. I'm going to create another player, right? And this is set on I'll set it on each exit. So now if I move, right, and then I'm going to disable this player movement, and I'm only going to let one to get out of the trigger. You see, it closes. Although this player is actually inside the trigger, but why did it close? Why did this method run? Because the event is going to run on each and every single exit. But if I do it on last exit and replay, and then I'm going to do the same, going to disable one, you see it doesn't exit. The exit method doesn't run. Why? Because it detects that there is still something inside the trigger. But now, if I re-enable and get out, then it exits. So I think this is very much preferred, but it depends on your game. Now, the deactivation method. Sometimes you want this whole trigger to run only once, maybe only on enter, and then deactivates, and on exit, or on exit. So let me give a better example. If I set this to on enter, take a look at is active. This obviously identifies that this trigger is active, is being calculated, in other words. The once it triggers is active is set to false. So now if I exit, nothing. Why? This is dead. It's not active anymore. Okay, so this is something also to consider. And if we do on exit, it closes, and then is active is set to false. So if I try to enter again, nothing happens. Why? Because it's disabled. And this is basically it. One last thing I can tackle is the settings. This is where you set these first properties. Use physics, use distance, use boolean is where you set the subsystems that are active. Obviously, if you don't need distance or boolean, just disable them. It would be better, you know, for performance and to be bug free and all that good stuff. The second property is a physics buffer size. It is by default set to 20. What this basically means is that the trigger, each trigger you set, is going to identify or being able to detect a maximum of 20 colliders. This is it. And of course, goes without saying that for a trigger to identify any sort of object, the player or whatever needs to have a collider. The collider is a must to identify anything. Okay? So yeah, this is it for the physics trigger. As for the distance and boolean, I'll be making other videos for them as well. Thank you very much, guys.